But more importantly, what we're going to do is ask panelists to come up. We've got a great group of people. So if people can come to the seats here. Pat Gallagher, Chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh. You know all these people, but whatever, I'll go through it. Farnam, Jahanian, the Interim President of Carnegie Mellon. Collier, who is like the poster child, I suppose, for this incredible entrepreneurial community that you've built here. And Jeff Romoff from UPMC. So thank you to the panelists for participating. Thank you all for being attentive. We're ready to roll. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the university presidents because you are in many respects the platform for this economy. You have been for years, but even more as the economy is restructured. You've become the foundation for business formation, for mature company competitiveness, for constant product and process innovation. So when you look at this report, what do you think is the next step? Because you've already been doing a whole bunch of things. Where do you take it from here so Pittsburgh can realize its full potential?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I always think of Pittsburgh as a know-how driven city. It always was. Even the original steel industry and advanced material industry was really a product of technological know-how finding a home here. What's happened, I think, is, you know, we lived through the tail end of that cycle and just saw the production. What's happening now is a new wave of know-how. And so the universities are at the front end of that process. We're a key input. And you're right, a lot of what you talk about as core advantages are things that we have been doing and improving and striving. For me, the take-home message in this report is that our obligation doesn't stop there, that the universities can't be an ivory tower of excellence. They have to be embedded and part of the community effort. In the end, this connecting the inputs to this economic potential is a team sport, and everyone has to be involved. And I think one of the messages for us is that we have to play a direct role. And part of that is sharing very openly and very strategically where the universities are strong and what that potential is. And then working actively, and I think, again, with intent and with a real strategy in a focused way, with the community, with the public sector, with our nonprofits, and with other companies to realize that potential. So it's a much more active, outward-looking posture for the universities. And I kind of feel like we've got all the talented players on the field, but we're missing that leadership to become a team.
Well, Bruce, first of all, let me thank you and also your colleagues for this wonderful report. It's very thought-provoking, and also this report is a reminder how fortunate we are, as Rich Fitzgerald said, in Pittsburgh to have such wonderful foundations behind us. Please join me in thanking all the foundations that make this great institution. Bruce, as you mentioned, there's no question that Pittsburgh is really well positioned. As someone who's relatively newcomer to the city for the past 3 years, I think you Pittsburghers almost take it for granted what a miracle this city has been, how far it has come, and how far it has actually, how much recognition that it's gotten nationally and globally for the progress that it's made. In fact, our mayor and also Rich often talk about this. Let me give a little bit of a context. If you look at what's happening globally, we are at the center of a societal and economic transformation that's taking place. It's enabled because of advances we're seeing in automation, advances we're seeing in digitization of information, and also advances that we're seeing in unprecedented access to data and analytics. Folks, if you step back and look at this, these are exactly the areas, including robotics, autonomous systems, and so on. These are exactly the areas that Pittsburgh and our universities have invested in. These are the areas that are transforming every sector of our economy, from healthcare, as Jeff would attest to that, to transportation, to energy distribution, to planning future cities, not to mention our business impact. Education is being transformed as a result of access to this technology. And in fact, Pittsburgh, if you look at it, there's tremendous amount of progress that Bruce alluded to. It's not a coincidence that we have 35 robotics companies that have popped up all over the city, especially in Lawrenceville and in Strip District. It's not a coincidence that through some really judicious investment that we have seen such a growth in East Liberty and also in Bakery Square, where Google and Autodesk and all of them are positioned there. So what does this mean for the universities? Very briefly, we are, as you have seen in other cities, we are in the middle of this innovation economy. We do two things in universities, if you really boil it down. We're in the education business, and we're in the research and innovation business. When it comes to education, we train the next generation. We recruit, we retain, we develop the next generation of essentially workforce. And that's the business that we're in, and that's how we're contributing to the economy. And by the way, the kind of people we're training are people in cybersecurity, in robotics, in software engineering, and so on and so on. And these are exactly the areas that we're seeing significant job growth. The second aspect of it has to do with our research and innovation. How do we contribute to this innovation economy? Well, it's through the startups that come out of these universities, that Bruce already mentioned a number of them. It's also creating an entrepreneurial environment where entrepreneurs and innovators want to come to Pittsburgh and be here. And that's at the heart of this innovation district that you alluded to, Bruce. Finally, it's about companies that want to come and work with us and be with us. And Pat would attest to this. One of our biggest challenges in universities is the number of companies who want to co-locate, have their people on our campus, have set up shop near our campuses, or on our campus if we have the space and the resources to accommodate them. So when you look at all of that, it puts us in the middle of this innovation economy. But echoing what Pat said, there is a remarkable alignment of public and private sector plus our folks in various institutions across this city, where it's allowing us to harness and explore all the assets that we have, which means deeper collaboration between the two universities and, of course, connecting with all the assets we have across this great city.
That's great. I want to turn to Jeff Romoff. When we were in the green room, I didn't see any green back there, but that's what it was called. You said that your UPMC is almost like the manifestation of this advanced research, this technological sophistication, this know-how. You're like a disruptive tech company in a disruptive industry. So give us, and which is not normally the way we think about health, the health system. Tell us where you think UPMC is now and where it might go, and how a collaborative ecosystem can help you get there.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you for your excellent report, and thank you to the foundations for supporting this. What I said specifically in the otherwise green room was that UPMC sees itself, in part, as the economic expression of exactly what Pat and Farnam have been talking about. And UPMC is known for the superb quality of its patient care and of its medical research, along with our partner in the School of Medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It is known as a top 10 institution with 39 hospitals. It has an insurance company with 3.5 million subscribers. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What I am proud of UPMC, particularly in the context of your presentation, is that UPMC is a major economic driver. It views itself at the heart of the innovation economy, and it strives to do that, and has strived to do that from the very beginning. Many in this room, who I look around, understand that I and UPMC have, for many years, been accused of having all the qualities that are now fashionable. We were accused of being entrepreneurial. We were accused of being concerned about the economy. We were accused of, in a certain sense, making money in order to create jobs and to do the kinds of things we're doing. UPMC now has 80,000 employees. It is an organization that will spend $17 billion this year. Based on the Commonwealth Fund, we will generate $35 billion to the regional economy on that. But embedded in UPMC, I think, is the future of innovation. This is not your mother's healthcare company, UPMC, and that's the bottom line. And I don't think, actually, in these studies, healthcare is, at least as UPMC done, is treated quite the way it should be treated and understood. When we talk about creating a company with 60 employees, UPMC hires 3,000 to 5,000 people a year, and it just kind of happens. And so it's a very serious drive. We are also thrilled and privileged to sit atop the U.S. Steel Tower. And you use steel, correctly so, as an economic driver of the former Pittsburgh. And when we sit upon that, when President Obama comes, he talks about the meds and eds, and he says that symbolizes UPMC being there. But from our perspective at UPMC, there's much more to it. What steel did in creating these jobs is it created an export economy. Only about 1% of what we produced here in this great city stayed in this city. 99% of what steel companies did left the city and was sold outside of the city. And the funds and the resources came back to the city to create the next generation. Where steel didn't rise to the occasion, was in the area of innovation. It did not rechange itself rapidly. Healthcare and UPMC is sitting exactly at that brink. We are driving the economy of Western Pennsylvania, and we are proud to do so. But healthcare is going to be the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity for economic innovation. When you watch Amazon, which we all covet to come to Pittsburgh, they have radically transformed and become a $100 billion company doing so. They have radically transformed the way we all buy things, the retail industry, and they have cast asunder half the retail industry in so doing. This is about to happen to healthcare. We are, at UPMC, we have a section of us called Digital Enterprises. We are working with our colleagues at CMU and Pitt in Big Data Alliance, but we're also working with Microsoft. It will not be long before each of us, in addition to getting our messages and our entertainment and updates on our handheld devices, will control our healthcare on our handheld devices. This will be revolutionary, absolutely revolutionary. And because it's going to be revolutionary, it's going to change the way healthcare is delivered. And we don't want to find ourselves in the wrong manufacturing business. UPMC wants to own that. And lastly, the second major effort of UPMC, which I think can have enormous economic consequences, along with the University of Pittsburgh, is translational science. You all noticed that Gilead just spent $12 billion to buy a company called Kite in Santa Monica. That company was less than $100 million in revenue and didn't make its first dollar of profit. It now brought in $12 billion. The scientists of the School of Medicine, the scientists of the university, with the economic expression of UPMC, are doing things as good. Indeed, we partner with Kite and will do things better. The economic opportunity for us in creating at least 20 or 30 companies is extraordinary. So, in sum, and much too longly said, UPMC sees itself as addressing straightforwardly the kinds of concerns that you so intelligently expressed, and to do so successfully for the region.
The three of you guys should just go on the road. But that's not your day jobs. Kelly, in a way, you're like a product of this ecosystem, right? And so, A, can you describe how the system worked for you? And B, part of this report, a good portion of this report, is how you get better. So you're probably better situated than anyone here to tell us, from a startup perspective, how does the ecosystem work even better for someone like you?
Sure, yeah. So I'll kind of try to share a little of my story in and amongst all of this. So I am a 2011 graduate of CMU. I did a major in material science and biomedical engineering. And as part of my senior year in college, we had a senior design course. And not just me, every engineering student in every engineering department at CMU does a senior design course. And pretty much the premise of this course is just to go, design and engineer something, right? And our project was completely open-ended. We could work on anything at all we wanted. And this was specifically in biomedical engineering. We decided, me and my group of randomly assigned classmates decided to focus on back pain because we're young 20-somethings and all are suffering with debilitating back pain for whatever reason. Otherwise, perfectly young, healthy, active people. So, selfishly, that's what we decided we wanted to spend our, senior design project working on. We went out, did a bunch of research on our own and tried to reach out to any back specialists, clinicians, specialized people that can kind of help guide us along this process. Most people just completely blew us off, but there was this one guy, this one physician at UPMC who, he immediately answered my email, "Oh my God, this sounds like so much fun. I would love to work with a group of engineering students." Just total enthusiasm out of the gate. And, we had no idea what our project was actually going to be at that point. We only knew that, we personally had a problem. And, so we meet with this physician, and it turns out he was kind of sitting on this idea for years, just as a physician seeing patients day in and day out with this same problem that we kind of identified. And all the while, he had this idea that he could never, bring to life. He's a physician, he treats patients. He doesn't, build products, right? So he was the one that kind of seeded this concept that, if we could design something that people could simply wear, a shirt-like garment that people could wear that could help to retrain their posture and their body position as they, sit, stand, sit at their desk all day, cook dinner, whatever sport of choice they're working on, whatever they're doing, if we can fix the biomechanical issues behind, all that stuff day in and day out, we can help to solve their back problems. So we go along and collaborate with him through our senior year, and by the end of the course, we'd actually built a fully functional prototype. It was a real live thing, and it worked. I mean, it had a lot of kinks and it had a lot of bugs in it, but it kind of validated the concept of what we were trying to accomplish. And this physician, Dr. Gary Chimes, I give him so much credit in the world. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I'm totally an accidental entrepreneur all the way. It was never part of my plan. But we take him this prototype, and he was just like, I need this. I need you to make this so it can be a thing that I can use on my patients. My patients need you to make this, right? And he's a very, very excellent, he's very convincing, and he kind of got me with the hook that, we're graduating seniors, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen, this could be the best experience of your life. Just try to make a company out of it, right? And somehow that did. That convinced me, and I decided, immediately after graduating, I would go on and try to start a company around this product that we built. There was a lot of consideration that kind of went into that, and I had a lot of, support from my own, personal network, and definitely, certainly advisors at CMU. And I remember I was kind of, wavering back and forth. I, at the time, was committed to a PhD program at Johns Hopkins, so that was where I thought my life was going to take me. And I remember, I'm still kind of deciding whether I want to go through with this or go to Johns Hopkins. I remember sitting in my, in the audience at my commencement ceremony, and the, CMU's president at the time, President Cohen, started announcing this new program, this new fund, the Open Field Entrepreneur Fund that, was funded by a bunch of, CMU alumni turned entrepreneurs to help invigorate, recent alumni becoming entrepreneurs. And I was like, wow, like this is it, like this is the sign, right? And it was kind of in that moment that I felt so sure, just so absolutely, definitely, I'm doing this thing. And the next day I walked into Project Olympus, which is another CMU startup incubator. And for me, that moment wasn't that I was dead set on that specific fund was what was gonna I was gonna get that investment. I didn't know any of the details at that time, but it was kind of more of a thing where it was a sign of hope and a sign of opportunity that regardless of this one specific fund, there is so many things that Carnegie Mellon and Pittsburgh in general is doing to help make this a thing. I kind of felt a little more secure in that I knew there would be resources and opportunities to help make this thing a reality. So that's kind of my, I guess, point number one in, Pittsburgh's already doing a great job. As you showed, all the articles with all the hype and all the, stuff that Pittsburgh has going for it.
What's your website? Because my back,
Yeah.
I could use the product.
So the company is called Activated Orthotics. It was on a slide up there somewhere. But yeah, so that was, number one, getting people to actually start. You have to, I think Pittsburgh has done a great job recently, even since I graduated in 2011, kind of creating this brand and creating this image that Pittsburgh is a good place for startups. And that helps not only, people who are graduating from the universities in Pittsburgh, but other entrepreneurs elsewhere look at places like Alpha Lab and decide, I'm going to move to Pittsburgh to start my startup here because it's a startup town.
Can I interrupt? Because
Yeah.
I want to, because I know what's our end thing.
Yep.
Oh, how much?
Okay.
How long? 10 to 12 more minutes.
Yeah. But
Why don't you finish your point, and then
Yeah.
I want to ask,
Yeah.
and just to sort of, I want to
Sure.
ask a question about who's your competition, both in the United States and globally, so people
Yeah.
think about that. But
Yeah.
finish this point, and then I want to go
yeah.
through that.
Just kind of continuing on. I mean, that's really how Activated started, and it was then another 5 years of kind of stumbling my way through figuring out how startups work. And ultimately, last fall, we were acquired by another local company called Elizur. That's a medical product distribution company. They're up near Wexford. And so that's kind of a perfect, and it's not by accident. They were our first customer and also a advisor of ours as we kind of try to find our way through this industry and through this space. That they not only wanted to acquire Activated for our product line and our product itself, but to bring my team in to start a product development department within this otherwise traditional distribution company. So it's kind of also on the back end, the conclusion of the company was about making another Pittsburgh company even bigger and stronger. So it's kind of a long series of fortuitous events.
One thing from your story that, with the county executive and the mayor here, there's so much talk in the United States about the city, suburban, exurban, rural rift. But if you begin to innovate products like you have here in the core of the city, not surprisingly, because that's where the advanced research institutions, the ecosystem is so strong, once you get to the manufacturing side or another element of your development, it could be that the companies that are going to benefit from that are located out either in other parts of Allegheny County or in other counties in the metropolis, something that is not well understood, I think. And that's really important. This is not about an innovation district just for the city. This is a platform for an entire metropolis, an entire region, which frankly your company represents. Competition. The competition is brutal out there. I was just in Israel for 10 days, and before then I was in the Nordics, Helsinki, Stockholm, Copenhagen for about a week. And, they're not standing still. And the difference between some of these other places is they have national governments that are intentionally focused on their innovative economies, and they have certain other advantages, let's say, than a city metropolis the size that Pittsburgh has. So how do you think about it? If you go back to the first slide, Pittsburgh is one of the top 30, let's say even top 50 innovative cities in the world. What's the nature and scale of the competition here? Because in some ways, it's not just between cities, it's almost between some of these national ecosystems. Jeff?
UPMC relishes competition.
I couldn't have guessed that.
And in the two what I consider to be most transformative areas of the future of healthcare, which, if we're talking economy, this is a $4 trillion industry. This is a huge industry. Breakthroughs in changing and radically transforming new products in healthcare become, for a region, if we do it here in Pittsburgh, an enormous boom. In the two areas that UPMC is focusing on, where we want to be the first movers, digital enterprise and translational science, we have two different kinds of competitors. None of them are healthcare institutions. The main competitor from a digital enterprise point of view would be, if they could get their act together in healthcare, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, who could take their enormously deep AI talent, which we look to Farnam and we look to Pitt to be able to provide. They would be serious competitors. They will catch up with that one of these days. But healthcare is a very different beast than retailing and banking. And they need people like us who know what we're talking about and who are also technologically fluent. In the area of translational science, I think the Gilead example is a perfect example. What happens is excellent scientists spin off from their universities and they create companies, and then these companies are purchased by pharmaceutical companies or others to market them. So UPMC's competition comes from the large, most competitive, and most resource-rich kind of sectors that one could imagine, and not from what you would think the healthcare sector. One other quick point. UPMC is in a very interesting position in being able to do product development, because when we come up with what we're calling My UPMC, the healthcare platform for making it so anyone can relate to all their healthcare providers, their insurer, and everyone else on their handheld device, we pilot it. We pilot it in our lot. We're the largest organization in the country. So, and if we're successful, our insurance company in this case earns money from the subscribers it gets. Then, if we own the product, if we own the patent, if we own that, we're then in a position of selling it to the rest of the country and rest of the world. So you win on two things. The same thing with translational science. The UPMC Hillman Cancer Center will do some of these cutting-edge immunotherapies. It will do all the trials on these cutting-edge immunotherapies. When we get it right, it will become an exporter company. It'll attract patients, as we did with transplantation, from across the country, and will be in a position to be attractive to a Gilead and someone else.
Competition.
Yeah, let me think. So I'm thinking about your report, and this is a report about competing economically in some sense. So I think what we're talking about is this is global. Knowledge moves across borders, and this is a global competition. And the ingredients of economic success that are laid out so clearly in this report mean that what we're competing for is an attention and an ability to create what's distinctive, a distinctive combination of talent, environment, and abilities that make this the place. Because what happens in innovation is you can't have 30 different places all trying to innovate in the same place. What's happening is you're creating a unique platform that makes this region more competitive than others, and that's the environment you have to create. I think our advantages are laid out very clearly here. I think part of that gambit is you play to your strengths. And I think Brookings has identified the right ones, that we're at the forefront in life sciences. It's the largest investment any country in human history has ever made in understanding a field of science. if we are not the epicenter of this new bioeconomy, we did something wrong, right? That's fundamentally true. I think in advanced manufacturing, it's a different set of issues. This is a region that's had a strong legacy history of manufacturing with enormous advantages in energy and talent and innovation. It needs to not live at the bottom end of that value chain, but own the top of it. And I think that's very clear. And then I'll let Farnam, of course, talk about the other. But I think this is a global competition. I would say that our challenge will be the one you alluded to. This is not looking at a competitive environment against stagnant, slow-moving competitors. Our challenge will be not moving at Pittsburgh speed, but moving at this global innovation speed. I think the pace at which that we will need to take risks, to take chances, and to move forward is much faster than we may be accustomed to. I actually think that'll be a fun challenge, and I'm kind of looking forward to it.
I'll be brief. When we talk about competition in the areas that we believe we lead the world, in robotics, in automation, analytics, and cybersecurity, and so on, the truth is that it's exactly the top-tier institutions that we compete with around whom these innovation economies have been built. It's MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, and Georgia Tech, and so on. And what a surprise. We believe Pittsburgh is competing with Boston, with Bay Area, with Austin, with Atlanta, and that's the category. Everybody else, we got it covered. We're not as worried as people think we should be. The truth is, we are competing with absolutely the top-tier institutions in engineering and computer science and the innovation economies that are essentially created around them. So what does that mean for us as an academic institution? I want to share a couple of data points with you. Over the last 5 to 7 years, we've had about 140 startups that have come out of CMU directly or indirectly. By the way, we're so proud of you. This was such a fabulous story. I have to. Bruce thinks that we should take our show on the road. No, we should send you on the road for us. And Jeff, by the way, you should let your doctors out more often. So back to my story. So a billion, and there are 148 companies that have come out over the 5 or 7, 8 years out of CMU, and directly or indirectly. We have accounted for about $1 billion worth of venture investment and follow-on investment in these companies. About 70% of that has gone to companies that are still in Pittsburgh and that are still in our region. So the question is, what's the disconnect? What are we missing? The truth is, I think we've come a long way. Bruce is absolutely right. We have some work to do here. And if we're really competing with these East Coast cities and West Coast cities and these innovation economies, what we need to do a couple of things very effectively. We need to recruit some companies whose headquarters are going to be in Pittsburgh. That is critical. You know which one I'm talking about, but I want to go beyond that. Or have companies whose business units, who have profit and loss responsibility, are based in our region. We have amazing companies that have R&D centers here. Google is a shining example of how we have succeeded in this city, how we have essentially catalyzed a whole innovation essentially corridor around Bakery Square and so on. But the truth is we need to have business units or headquarters of companies, and that leads to not only R&D jobs, it leads to marketing jobs, sales jobs, jobs in HR, jobs in customer support, services, and so on. And that has an effect that penetrates the entire city. The second point I want to make is that we have some wonderful startups that have done really well, including the example you just heard about. We need to have a few startups that become unicorns. We need to have some startups that have either exit strategies that turn into hundreds of millions of dollars or billion-dollar companies, or more importantly, startups that grow over time and are based in Pittsburgh, and they become anchor companies. I am reminded of Dell in Austin when I was a grad student. It transformed the city. It's not that there weren't other companies around. It became an anchor high-tech company. And that's actually what Pittsburgh needs. So we have some great prospects. We have Louis Van Ahn, of course, who is doing Duolingo. We have Argo AI, which is funded partially by Ford and has a great opportunity ahead. And of course, we have others such as Soul Power and so on that have either connections to CMU or Pitt. So I think those are two really important ingredients. And the last one that I want to say is that something that Pat and I both work on actively. We need to invent new ways of doing more translational work and technology transfer and nurturing the ecosystem that we're all responsible for, but have new ways where we, in fact, catalyze that. The NREC facility that sits in Lawrenceville today, just imagine, 20 years ago, that facility was put together. Now, I can't imagine the CMU administration decided to put NREC in Lawrenceville. As I said, I'm relatively a newcomer, but notice what has happened 20 years later. It has helped catalyze that environment. It has led to now a lot of robotics companies in the area, a lot of development, but equally important, it does the same certain kind of research that we don't necessarily do on campus. It's translational, it has a direct impact in transfer of knowledge from lab to practice. Thank you.
So this is the lightning round, because all these people need to go back to work and keep innovating, right? And Kelly, I'm going to start with you. You've got the political leaders here, philanthropic leaders, you've got the banks, you've got the entrepreneurs, all of it is here. One thing, because you've actually, more than anyone else on the panel, really do express the entrepreneurial reality of starting a company and then moving it up the food chain. One thing either that could have helped you or could help others like you going forward that this group together could do.
Right. I think one important thing is, my experience was very collaborative, but in a lot of ways it was lucky in that we collaborated with a UPMC physician, Pitt associate professor. Our IP might not have come out of that institution. We had to, request for it to be released so that we could use it to start a company. If Pitt would have taken claim, or UPMC would have taken claim to that IP, Activated probably never would have happened, right? And, I've walked into meetings in the U.S. Steel Tower with people at UPMC and in the Highmark building, and we kind of would sit around a table and talk about how much we like each other, but neither of us knew or understood how we could really effectively work together. And I feel like there are so many organizations, so many groups in Pittsburgh, but there's a lot of just disconnecting about, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? How do we work together? There's a lot of kind of missing formalities and how each of these organizations kind of connects, works together in a way that can be actively productive rather than sometimes they feel like they're competing against each other and they hinder each other. So that's kind of my, I guess, one takeaway.
Very well said, really. Pat, what game changer for this group?
Well, I want to echo Kelly. I think this idea of, connective tissue in the community is really a key part. But I want to sort of do another one. When we look at our opportunity in front of us, there's a tendency to look and copy others, be the next Silicon Valley or be the next Boston. We should be the next Pittsburgh. Right. Our answer will look different. And I think there's some opportunities to do things much better than those other places did. A lot of technology, we know how to be the disruptors. Universities can come up with the new ideas, but if you don't bring the community along to share in that economic growth, you can create real problems. In fact, we can destroy the very thing that makes Pittsburgh so special now, a livable city that we all love and embrace. So I think this is a chance to do it the Pittsburgh way, bring our communities, our existing workforce along, learn how to enjoy growth and prosperity, but do it in a way that, in fact, becomes a model. And I think, it's great to look at what others have done and sort of get that blueprint and that initial momentum. We should actually be innovating ourselves and coming up with a way to do it. Our answer will be different. The role of our state, the role of our governments, the role of our nonprofits, everything will be different, and that's okay. But I think that's the key challenge.
I want to build on that. In fact, if you look at Kelly's example, it's an awesome example of how you start with CMU and you connect with UPMC and Pitt and the physicians over there, and you build a company that has come out of the strength that we have. This is a fabulous example of how when you bring different assets in our community together, it works magically. My one comment is, again, as someone who's relatively new to Pittsburgh, is we need to be coordinated and organized better. I think you have an amazing alignment of public sector, private sector, our civic institutions, obviously foundations, and companies, and the universities, and so on. We're all doing amazingly well. We're all contributing to this economy, without any doubt. What I think is a big game changer for us is we need to have a way where we are much, much more nimble in responding to opportunities that show up. And sometimes it happens organically, and you don't want to kill the entrepreneurial spirit that you just heard on this stage from Kelly. You want to make sure that happens, but at the same time, opportunities come our way, and we need to have ways we're much better organized to go leverage it and build on it.
That's great.
I'm personally very excited about this.
Jeff.
Picking up on what my colleague said, let me address it from a different angle. I've been doing what I do for 40 years in Pittsburgh, and I've watched a great evolution to the discussion today. But there is a fundamental historical flaw in Pittsburgh, and that is many people outside this room don't understand in their gut what we're talking about. Pittsburgh is a traditional city. Pittsburgh's, the parents and the grandparents of this generation understand work, hard work, being in the mills, being at their union meeting, doing what they have always did, because that's what created their home, that's what created their family. And their ability to adapt to all that we're talking about today is still not there. It's going to take another generation to do that. Fortunately, the leaders up here, particularly of the university and Kelly and the startups, and in particular our county executive and our mayor and our foundation leaders are leading the way. But they, in my estimation, are a couple of horse lengths ahead of the very population that elects them. So either we make good and prove the case, or I think we're going to fall back into the way other cities have failed.
That's great. So the mayor's going to close up here. I just, as one final note for myself, I just want to go back and thank Grant Oliphant and Dave Roger from Hines and Hillman, because because you do a lot of this stuff around the U.S. and outside the U.S., and you'll say a bunch of things, and people say, well, that was interesting, but please go home. And these guys said, if that's really true, that this place has enormous potential from the platform of Oakland and then beyond, then A, prove it to us, and B, give us some sense of how to move forward. So to you guys and to Mellon, who's been so involved in this, thank you, because this is so critical to not just the future of this place, but to the future of our country. Mayor.